Hi, I'm Dan Townsend. This is a little bit of free CPD on the principles behind effective curriculum design. Um, so, what is curriculum? What does that word mean? A little bit of a reminder. It's the substance of what students learn at school. It's what we teach, it's the content, it's the knowledge we impart. Um, Obviously, there's a lot more focus on this at the moment because of the 2019 Ofsted framework. And yeah, curriculum obviously plays a big part of that, and so it should. I actually really welcome this kind of new focus at the moment on curriculum. I think lots of people within the educational community do, and rightly so. So, kind of a few kind of if you're just taking a quick look at this on the left hand side, but you'll see that curriculum pops up in intent and implementation, and lots of people get confused about those two elements. So I think it's quite useful to think of it this way, which Heather Fern from Ofsted kind of puts out there as kind of an idea of getting your head around this. Um, when we're thinking about curriculum, when we're thinking about the design, think of it almost like a menu in a restaurant that lays out kind of the knowledge which you want to impart. It's kind of this is the content we are going to teach students effectively. Um, Of course, though, you could have, and I'm sure you've had this experience in the past where you've gone into a place and you've seen the menu and you've been like, yeah, that looks really tasty. But when it comes out, the food is a little bit rubbish. And this is a really important thing to think of because really, um, the design is it's all well and good having a really clearly thought out curriculum, but if the teaching of it is poor, if the delivery of that curriculum is poor, then it's not going to be a successful curriculum. So you definitely shouldn't see um, curriculum as divorced from the actual teaching side of things. And the two are very much interlinked. Um, this session, though, is going to focus on some of the principles behind great curriculum design. So, some more, we're looking more at the design side of things. Um, and kind of the first step of that, you really need to know how memory works. So, um, I'm actually going to start here by reading you a story and just have a little listen. One night, two young men from Egulac went down to the river to hunt seals, and while they were there, it became foggy and calm. Then they heard war cries, and they thought, maybe this is a war party. They escaped to shore and hid behind a log. Now canoes came up, and they heard the noise of paddles and saw one canoe coming up to them. There were 5 men in the canoe, and they said, what do you think? We wish to take you along. We're going up the river to make war on the people. One of the young men said, I have no arrows. Arrows are in the canoe, they said. I will not go along. I might be killed. My relatives do not know where I've gone. But you, he said, turning to the other, may go with them. So one of the young men went, but the others returned home. And the warriors went on up the river to a town on the other side of Kalama. The people came down to the water, and they began to fight, and many were killed. But presently the young man heard one of the warriors say, quick, let us go home. That Indian has been hit. Now he thought, oh, they're ghosts. He did not feel sick, but they said he had been shot. So the canoes went back to Egulac, and the young man went ashore to his house and made a fire, and he told everybody and said, behold, I accompanied the ghosts, and we went to fight. Many of our fellows were killed, and many of those who attacked us were killed. They said I was hit and I did not feel sick. He told it all, and then he became quiet. When the sun rose, he fell down. Something black came out of his mouth. His face became contorted. The people jumped up and cried. He was dead. Okay, take 2 minutes out, go do something else. make a cup of tea, I don't know, but just go away for a bit and just pause the video. When you come back, try and write down as much of a story as you can remember from start to finish. So just tell it as a story on the page and see how you get on. Okay, hopefully you've done that now. So just have a quick look at this. This was the actual story itself. You can have a quick skim read of it. And again, feel free to pause this video if you want to check it. How did you do? How much of a story did you remember? You might have been thinking when you were listening to it that it feels a little bit of an odd story, and that's for a reason. This comes from a 1932 study, and the story is actually called The War of Ghosts. And Bartlett's study used a Native American folk story to investigate how memory was constructed. The British participants were read the story and then asked to reproduce it 15 minutes later. So you guys had 2 minutes, imagine doing it after 15. They were then asked to produce it again at further intervals. So as the story was unfamiliar and lacked reference points for participants, they often shortened it, they made omissions, the phrases used were changed to fit the language and concepts from the participants' own culture. So for example, the word boat was kind of used when they were retelling the stories instead of canoes. And Bartlett argued that what this demonstrated was that our memory relies on something called schemas, that what our memory is doing is when it hears a story like that, it's trying to kind of use what already exists and what our memory already understands, and kind of, I don't know, reconstructs it based on what we already know. And we basically have schemas for all sorts of things. For what a criminal is like, for what counts as food, and a simple way of thinking of this is about, ordering food in a fast food restaurant. We have a schema for that, and it doesn't matter where you are in the world, you can usually go into a restaurant and order food fairly successfully, even if it's in a different language. I guess kind of the difficulty might be if you went in somewhere which was really kind of different in terms of context. So if you went into a sushi bar and you'd kind of never been in that sort of environment before, then that might kind of throw you. But generally, at other times, we use our schemas to construct basically how we approach tasks in life or whatever it might be. And this is effectively how our memory works, how we assimilate new information. We often change our schemas to fit what we've learned. And when accommodating new information, we change our memories to keep our schemas intact and unchanged. If you're interested in this and you want a little bit more, I thoroughly recommend this book, What Every Teacher Needs to Know About Psychology. If you have a look at pages 19 to 20, then it kind of gives you a little bit more if you're interested in it, or just have a Google. There's plenty of stuff out there. So why is this important when we're thinking about curriculum theory? Well, think about kind of student progression under kind of the previous national curriculum. If you're looking at that kind of 2 to 8 over that side, we've seen plenty of stuff like this. Progression models. Also think about progression models built into things, based on Bloom's taxonomy. That was kind of part and parcel, wasn't it, of everyday teaching. Thing is, when we're thinking of the way that memory actually builds, well, the progression of memory and how we develop and build memory is something totally different. So when you're thinking of schema and how a schema works, it's constructed from various different points, isn't it? So I'm just kind of give you an idea. Imagine that middle bubble on this diagram is the word, I don't know, invasion, let's say, for instance. And anything connected to that word, invasion, in terms of our learning, builds up that schema. So, for instance, if you did Year 7 history, you might kind of have learnt about the Norman conquest of England, so an invasion. So that's one little bubble kind of added on. Equally, you might have watched, I don't know, Saving Private Ryan, and that might have given you some ideas about an invasion. You might have, um, in year 9, have looked at Normandy landings as well, so that ties those two elements together. It might be that your kind of understanding of invasion comes from watching Independence Day or some similar film. Anyway, it all builds into that kind of schematic understanding of what that word invasion means. And if you think about it, if that's not kind of a simple building up, that's lots of different elements coming into play to make meaning of that word. And I've touched on history a lot there; it's my subject, but that might come across from lots of different subjects, and lots of different places and lots of different popular culture build up that kind of schematic understanding. So if you kind of recognise how memory builds in that way, then if we're thinking about diagrams like that, well, I don't know, they don't really kind of seem effective when you're thinking about the progression of understanding of an idea or wherever it might be, um, in terms of memory building up. So this kind of spider's web sort of construction of memory is much more useful, I think. So what's that got to do with the curriculum? Well, progress is effectively assimilating new knowledge and accommodating new knowledge, and that's where our subjects come into play. And having an effective curriculum enables us to teach new information that relates to what is already known, not effectively just more stuff, just moving on to the next topic. Effectively, it's about kind of picking the right content to focus on so it enriches and transforms what we already know. That's what we should be aiming to do with our curriculum. And this is kind of like where we come into thinking about curriculum sequencing, the memory retention. I'm sure lots of people have heard of this already, but this idea of the curriculum as a box set, which is put together by Claire Seeley, who's absolutely fantastic. And again, I suggest you follow her on Twitter, have a look at some of her ideas, which are out there on the net. But yeah, I really, really like this. If you're thinking about any box set you've ever watched, like Game of Thrones or The Wire, whatever it might be, the initial episodes introduce the characters, they frame the narrative, they reassure the audience. We might kind of think about it as, we're just kind of getting into the series itself. It's kind of that shallow learning of what that world looks like. But as subsequent episodes build, they recap on previous points. Our gaze is directed so that we make connections between characters and events, and it builds the story from there. So as we watch episode by episode, our shallow learning and shallow understanding of that world moves to a much deeper understanding. And think about it in terms of teaching a topic. You might have like a little subplot which is resolved in one lesson, and then the main plot is resolved across a topic, and you might have a story arc of that idea of invasion, for instance, which might carry on over years, and you're building your understanding of it as you go through. And I think it's really useful to think of the curriculum in those terms, like this great narrative which you're building up in terms of your subjects. Here's a little example from history. So this is something which I kind of put together as kind of thinking about a disciplinary strand. In this case, the understanding of Christianity in Britain and the story of that over time. And it's really important for our students to understand that at GCSE and at sixth form as well. So pairing that all the way back to year 7 with the first Christian missionaries arriving in Britain, and then moving that story onwards through year 8 and year 9, and then also through GCSE and A level is really, really important, and in terms of constructing that and building that schema. But that only comes through really careful thinking and back planning and really kind of seeing how that progression works and how you're building that over time. So yeah, it's that idea of enriching or transforming what we already know. So in a box set, each time we encounter a character, in different contexts, our understanding of them, their plight becomes richer, our emotional attachment grows or potentially shrinks as well. Within our curriculum, each time we learn a concept in a different setting, our understanding of it becomes denser, more solid, and more nuanced. And to build on this, I'm sure lots of people have read Daniel Willingham's book, and that beautiful quote that memory is a residue of thought. But another quote from that, which gets forgotten sometimes, is that understanding is memory in disguise. And if you apply that to your curriculum and your curriculum thinking and how your curriculum builds, I think it's really, really useful. And you can see the power of that sort of narrative idea, that box set idea coming through from that. So when you're thinking about your curriculum and you're thinking about that progression and about development, content selection is obviously something which is really, really important. What do you put into your curriculum? Well, obviously you want to kind of build and think about what are those platforms of understanding, what's going to be important later on, where are kind of your endpoints and midpoints along here, and what do students need to know by those certain stages, and only you can really decide that. It might be based on what you've chosen for exam specifications. It might be, I don't know, you've got to think of your school context and you've got to work that out yourself. But once you have, the really important stuff, we would classify as kind of our core content, our core knowledge. And that's the stuff I want my students to remember and to stick in their long-term memories for years. That's not to say that you won't teach other stuff. There will be the kind of hinterland knowledge. It's how you frame that knowledge, the stories you tell, the examples you use. It's the ground from which that core springs, and that is just as important. That's what adds the richness to our subjects. But you need to think of your kind of curriculum as in terms of like that. How do you pan for that gold within your lessons? How do you kind of leave the room with the core knowledge and that core understanding really, really deeply ingrained? And that's often where the teaching and the pedagogy comes into that. I'm just going to kind of give you a little example of that. So this is from teaching Henry VIII with Year 12 recently. Well, I was kind of teaching Henry's final years, and in terms of the core content of that, and the hinterland, well, the most important things about the final year of his reign is that he was an unpredictable tyrant, which led to some very dodgy political decisions, really, and foreign policy decisions. And that's what I want students to walk away with. I want them to walk away with that understanding. That's the really crucial stuff. But at the same time, there's so many great stuff about him. There's so much great stuff about Henry VIII. I'm going to be talking about lessons about his poor health in those last years of his life. I'm going to be talking about his 52-inch waist. I'm going to be talking about his leg ulcers and all of that sort of thing, because that helps connect to the idea of him being, the kind of the health problems he would have, relating to kind of the kind of psychological issues he was having, which meant that potentially he wasn't the best person to be in charge of the country, and what makes him such an unpredictable tyrant. So there's kind of those connections with those things. Effectively, I don't really need my students in an exam talking about his 52-inch waist, but it helps make that sort of unpredictable tyrant element kind of stick, doesn't it? And that's important. You've got to think, what is it unacceptable and acceptable for people to forget? Which is kind of a weird thing. And obviously, when I'm going forward in future lessons, I want to be pushing on that unpredictable tyrant element. But that's not to say you shouldn't think about what's the best way of kind of using that hinterland to, again, kind of use that as the platform knowledge to make that course stick. Yeah. Anyway, those are just a few ideas which hopefully takes your understanding of curriculum forward a little bit. I think everything I've said there can just be summarised really in one line, which is the curriculum is the progression model. And if you kind of take it from that sense, then I think everything flows from it. So, a lot of this is kind of, as I said, at the moment, focus. The spotlight is on curriculum because of the Ofsted framework. But really, I do quite like the way that it talks about design and the delivery entwined. If you get those two things right, you get right what the actual kind of knowledge you want to impart is, and you get the delivery of that really, really effectively, and you build it up so that it's not just like you teach a topic and move on. You revisit, you build that schema, then that's how you will progress as a student in a certain subject. Um, so yeah, that idea of the curriculum is the progression model. It can all be brought down just to that succinct sentence. And if you're interested in this, particularly the design side of things, I really, really strongly suggest you get hold of Dylan Williams' Principles of Curriculum Design. Um, it's I've kind of put a nice little link to a summary, but really start thinking, how do these principles relate to your context? Um, Start thinking, in your subjects, is your curriculum balanced? Is it focused? Is it relevant? All of those sort of elements, and kind of think, do I need to revisit some of this? Anyway, yeah, I hope that was useful. This is a lovely tweet just to leave it on. Have a read through it. I'm not going to read it all, but yeah, I hope that this was useful and gives you some basic principles behind what makes successful curriculum design. Thanks very much.